In this Clair Obscur Expedition 33 guide, I'm going to be showing you how to play Lune. She is one of the two characters you get at the very beginning of the game. She is arguably one of the most complicated characters to play, and it can be a bit overwhelming when you first start this game. So in this video, I'm not going to go into any plot points or anything like that. I'm simply going to explain how she works and how to use her in order to get the best out of her. So the first thing to discuss with Lune is her role. She is sort of the de facto nuker / healer of the group. Not only does she have a lot of abilities that hit every target on the screen, which not every character has a lot of those. Every character does have some abilities that will hit multiple targets. She seems to have a lot more than just about any other character other than Minoko. And she can also heal very effectively, and she has one very key skill called Rebirth, which allows her to revive a fallen teammate, and that's very, very important in this game. It is possible to stay alive through a lot of fights simply by reviving characters with her and then parrying attacks and then reviving characters until you're back on your feet. So I highly, highly recommend you get the Rebirth skill right away. So the next thing to note about Lune is that all of her skills either deal ice, fire, lightning, earth, or some combination of these damage types, but her skills only deal those 4 damage types. And even though she can gain weapons that deal physical, light, dark, or void damage with her base attacks or her free aim shots, all of her abilities will only deal those damage types. There are no skills Lune possesses that use the damage type of the weapon she has equipped, unlike other characters in the game. This can somewhat limit Lune because she predominantly only deals those 4 damage types. If you're facing enemies that are resistant to 2 or more of those damage types, she can have problems because she tends to cycle through the elements in the way that she plays because of her stains mechanic, which we're going to get into next. And if she has to cycle through elements that the enemy is resisted against, then she isn't as effective in those scenarios where other characters can simply use different skills that deal different damage types. She doesn't have as much choice in the matter sometimes. So stains are the primary mechanic of Lune, and they can be quite overwhelming at first. But the long and short of it is, whenever you use an ability, you will generate a corresponding stain based on the element that you use. For instance, if you use ice, an ice skill, you will generate an ice stain. If you use a fire skill, you'll generate a fire stain, and so on and so on. When you generate stains, you can consume them to empower other skills, which we'll go into in just a second. But the idea is that you use an ability, and then the next ability is empowered by the previous ability, and then the next ability is empowered by the previous ability, and so on, which encourages Lune to cycle through different elements in order to keep empowering her following skills. Now, if you mouse over a skill, you will see on the top right-hand side of the tooltip what stains a skill generates. So if you look at the Wildfire tooltip, for instance, you'll notice it generates a fire stain, but it also generates another stain there, and that stain is a light stain. Light stains are another type of stains in this game that can be used for any element. So, for instance, if a skill needs 2 fire stains in order to boost it, if you have a fire stain and a light stain, that will suffice. This means that you could follow up Wildfire with the Stormcaller ability because you would essentially consume the fire stain and the light stain for double thunder strikes on turn's end. And something that's really important to note when looking at skills is whether they generate light stains or not, because a lot of times, if a skill is empowered by one stain, like it only needs a fire stain or an ice stain, etc. to empower it, but the skill itself generates a light stain every time you use it, it will allow you to use the same skill over and over if you like that skill and the enemy is weak to that damage type. So selecting skills that generate light stains is ideal most of the time. And each element typically uses another element to empower it. So fire skills will use ice stains in order to empower them typically. Ice skills will use earth stains to empower them typically. Lightning skills will use fire stains, and earth skills will use lightning stains. This is always pretty much true. There are a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, that translates into a flow of, if you use a fire skill, then you'll be following that with a lightning skill. If you use a lightning skill, then you should probably be following up with an earth skill. If you use an earth skill, then you should be following up with an ice skill. And if you use an ice skill, then you'll be following it up with a fire skill. So that means depending on what ability you use at the beginning of combat, you'll find yourself somewhere in that rotation, and then you should probably expect to follow that rotation to its conclusion, with some exceptions which I'll go into now. So if you take a look at some of the more powerful skills that Lune has, we'll take a look at Hell, for example. This is a 9 action point skill, so you basically have to have max action points in order to even cast this. But if you consume an Ice, Earth, and Lightning stain, you will greatly increase its damage, which means that you probably have had to use a ice skill, an earth skill, and a lightning skill prior to using this skill in order to have those stains typically. It's not always true, of course, because as we know, some of the skills generate a light stain that can suffice for one of those, but you would minimally have to use probably about 2 skills before using this if you want to empower it. So you wouldn't use this straight out of the gate typically. And since there is a bit of a flow to elements, which I just mentioned a second ago, this would likely mean that you would begin with a lightning skill, then follow with an earth skill, then follow with an ice skill, and then follow with this skill. However, depending on which skills you're using, some of them generate light stains, so you might be able to bypass 1 skill out of there and then use this after 2 skills. So you can see Lune kind of has a general flow to her that can be kind of complicated, and these things do not factor in elemental resistances of enemies. She has a flow to her combat of elements that she needs to do kind of regardless of what those resistances are. So as I mentioned earlier, that can make her very ineffective in certain situations. However, I do want to bring your attention to a few other abilities that operate sort of separately from this flow. The first one is Elemental Trick. This skill doesn't deal very much damage, but it does an ice, fire, lightning, and earth hit. So it deals 4 hits total, 1 of each type. And if you critically hit with one of those damage types, you will generate a stain of the corresponding type. So theoretically, if you have very high crit chance or 100% crit chance, you would generate 4 stains from using this one ability, 1 of each, which would allow her to empower some of the most powerful skills that she can cast after using 1 skill and get to those more quickly. So this is a very good skill if you have very high crit chance. The next skill, Mayhem, consumes all stains that you have to deal high elemental damage to the target, and if you have 4 stains, you can break the target, effectively bypassing its turn. So this is a great way to clean up stains you don't need, or if you want to break the target, you have 4 stains, you can use this as well. It's very cheap AP-wise for the amount of damage that it deals, so it's a great way sometimes to deal damage if you don't have the right combination of stains to empower a skill that you want to cast. And then lastly, we come to Elemental Genesis, which deals very, very high damage to all enemies with 8 hits, dealing the different elements at random to them, so you don't know which damage type it's going to deal. But you can only cast this if you have 1 of each stain effectively. Remember that light stains will suffice for any of those in their place. You could have 2 or 3 light stains and another stain. That would work as well. But this skill does really, really good damage to everything on the screen. It's basically a screen clearing skill. And you can use Elemental Trick if you have high crit chance to get you all of those stains. So then on your next turn you can cast Elemental Genesis. So that is a pretty deadly combo, and you should be trying to work towards that throughout the game, in my opinion. So the next thing to take a look at with Lune is the weapons that she uses. As I mentioned earlier, she can get weapons that deal physical, light, dark, and void damage, which can make her basic attacks deal those damage types as well as her free aim shots, but her abilities themselves will always deal either fire, ice, earth, or lightning damage. And what you're looking for on Lune's weapons is predominantly a way to get stains you need faster in order to cast empowered skills faster. You don't want to have any turn where you're not casting an empowered skill if you can help it, because you want to deal as much damage as possible. So let's take a look at some of the weapons, and I'm not taking into account where in the game that you get these, but I'm simply trying to give you an idea of how looking at these will work, so that as you acquire some of these weapons, you can factor them into your rotation. So the first one we're going to take a look at is Bedalim. This makes it so using a skill that consumes stains increases your damage by 20%, stacking up to 5 times, and resetting on using a skill without consuming stains. So this means if you can keep that flow going from one empowered ability to the next, you'll keep increasing your damage. Main challenge of doing this is obviously making sure you have the right stains for the skills, and that you also have enough AP to pull this off. Realistically, if you're using this, you're probably going to have to use low AP skills in order to be able to cast one that's empowered every turn, and low AP skills tend to need less stains to empower them as well. Now, the level 10 bonus helps with this because it makes it so on turn start, if you have no stains, you generate 2 random stains. Now, this is really only good for the beginning of combat, because if you are trying to pull off this cycle, you're going to generate stains every time. But this will allow you to begin this cycle at the very beginning of combat when you wouldn't have no stains, and the level 20 bonus will give you an AP when stains are consumed. So every time you use stains for this, you'll generate more AP, which should allow you to keep this cycle going. So next, let's take a look at the Colin weapon. This is a very powerful weapon because you have a 50% chance to generate a light stain when you consume another stain to empower a skill. And as we know, light stains can be used to empower any element, so they're really, really good to have. And when you cast some of these abilities like Wildfire, which we mentioned earlier, you'll generate a light stain and a fire stain. So this might effectively mean that you have 3 stains the next turn, which could allow you to empower some of the more powerful skills, which is great. And as you upgrade this weapon, you'll get +1 AP whenever you consume a light stain, which will help you cast higher effectiveness skills because you'll have more AP in general. And it will boost the damage of skills that use light stains to empower them. So this is just really, really strong overall and should help facilitate empowering your skills, any skills that you like, rather easily. Now let's take a look at Demonirum. This weapon makes it so your lightning skills cost 1 less AP, so it's easier to cast lightning skills because you don't have to use as much AP. They deal increased lightning damage, and you'll start the battle with a fire stain, which will make it easier to empower lightning skills, as we noted earlier. So this can be really good when using this element. Now the disadvantage of this is that it kind of makes you focus on one element, and if enemies are resistant to that damage type in the area that you're in, that's not necessarily good. Flying Waters is a great place for elemental damage early on in the game, or for lightning damage, so you can use it there. But it kind of restricts you because you're going to be trying to alternate basically between lightning and fire as much as you can. So now if you take a look at the Kralim weapon, it makes it so when you cast a skill, it increases the skill damage of all other elements by 20%. So this works really well when you are planning on cycling through the elements, kind of naturally how she does anyway. So if you keep casting a different element each time instead of casting a previous element, you can keep boosting your skill damage, which will make Lune do more damage as a whole. And also, at level 10, if you start with no stains, then she will generate 2 random stains at the beginning of combat, so she can empower the very first skill she uses, which is great. And again, at level 20, she'll gain an AP when stains are consumed, allowing her to keep up this flow every turn, making this a really, really good weapon for her. Next, we'll take a look at the Trebuchem weapon. This is a really interesting weapon because it allows you to generate a random stain on free aim shot. So each time you do a free aim shot, you can get a stain, which allows you to basically empower pretty much anything at the beginning as long as you have, a variety of skills and start from the very beginning. And any turn you're lacking a stain, you can always just fire a free aim shot for 1 AP and try and get a stain you need to empower your skill. So that's really strong in my opinion. You also gain an AP whenever you use a stain to empower a skill, which helps keep your AP up. And base attacking can generate 2 random stains, so if you're really desperate and you have no stains, you can also base attack as well to generate stains. And also, if you use some of the Luminas in the game that make it so you attack more times with base attack, you could theoretically generate 4 random stains in 1 base attack, which would give you plenty to empower your next skill, which is great. And the last weapon that I want to take a look at is the Scabbrum weapon. I'm not going to go through all the weapons, I just wanted to go through some examples so you could understand kind of the concepts behind how they operate. But the Scabbrum weapon is unique, and there's another weapon like it, because there's 2 weapons that do this effectively, I think, maybe 3. But essentially, they give you a 50% chance to generate a dark stain when you consume a stain to empower a skill. So if you consume, 1 stain in order to empower a skill, you have a 50% chance. If you consume 2, you have a, more likely chance or whatever. So, but these dark stains are unique. They are not light stains, they're not fire stains, they're not earth, lightning, ice stains, etc. They operate completely differently. And each time you see one over on the right-hand screen when they're sitting there, any skills that you use will deal 50% more damage when they're sitting there. Now, you won't consume these stains when you use those skills, and they'll continue to fill up your sort of stain gauge there on the right-hand side, taking more and more spaces, making it harder and harder to empower your skills with other stains. So in order to use this effectively, you're going to have a lot of skills that only need like 1 stain in order to empower it. If you have many that have multiple stains, you're not going to be able to use this very effectively. So there's only really 2 ways to clear these dark stains once you have them. First one is base attacking. When you base attack with a dark stain, it does 200% more damage, which is a lot. So this can be a great way to clear it if you don't want that dark stain there anymore. Maybe you filled up a bunch of them and it's getting harder to empower your skills. And the second way is when you reach level 20 with this weapon. If you do actually manage to fill that whole thing with 4 dark stains, any skill that you cast after that will consume them to deal 300% more damage and clear them off your thing. So that's really unique about this weapon and another weapon in the game. It's kind of difficult to use when you first start playing Lune, so I don't recommend it. But once you kind of have her combat down, you'll get a better sense on how to use this weapon. So lastly, concerning Pictos and Luminas early on in the game, I won't go into like all the things you can do with Lune, but essentially what's going to prevent Lune from being able to cast an empowered skill or a skill every turn is her AP. She needs to generate lots of AP in order to be able to keep casting skills every turn. So early on, you want to focus on skills that don't have high AP costs. You want to focus on skills that don't consume lots of stains in order to be able to empower them, like 1, maybe 2, maybe like 1 skill that has 2. The rest have 1 early on in the game till you get more AP. And also focus on Pictos and Luminas that improve your AP from doing certain things. Maybe it's from free aim shot. Maybe it's from, starting the beginning of combat with extra AP so that you just have a larger pool to kind of whittle through as combat goes on. Or maybe it's getting an extra AP every turn. You want to focus on things that are going to give you AP early on so you can keep a rotation going and you don't have to base attack with her. Because remember, when you base attack with her, she doesn't generate stains to empower your future skills. It will generate AP, but you want to try and avoid having to use base attack with her as much as possible unless you're using some sort of weapon that benefits base attacking. Otherwise, you're going to want to try and go through that rotation of skills or a rotation of skills that's similar to what I mentioned in order to keep her damage high and her skills empowered every turn. With regards to attributes for Lune, what attributes you use are largely dictated by the weapon that you're using, because each weapon scales with different stats. This is true for just about every character. And as you're leveling up in the game, you're going to be switching around weapons, trying to figure out ones you like. So I highly recommend putting some points in Vitality, because you simply can survive longer in combat while you're learning the moves of enemies. It gives you time to learn the rotations. And because if you put like a whole bunch of points in, like, I don't know, defense and agility, your weapon scales with it, and then you switch to luck, vitality or something, then you're getting no scaling damage from it. But also, I will just mention that, generally speaking, agility and luck are just about needed on every character in order to increase your speed, so that you can go more often in combat, and in order to increase your critical chance, so that you're doing critical hits and dealing more damage. This isn't always true depending on your gear, but generally, if you don't know what you're doing, Vitality, luck, and agility are good investments for attributes, and trying to find weapons that scale with those could be beneficial to you. So that wraps up my video on Lune. I hope this was helpful to you. I know she can be kind of confusing. She's really fun to play. She's one of my favorite characters in the game, but it can be kind of tricky, and the fact that she's kind of relegated to 4 elements when enemies have resistances and weaknesses can sometimes make her less or more effective. But just remember that the damage type of her weapon doesn't play a huge role in her combat. She's not going to be base attacking a lot, except maybe the first few hours of the game when you're, trying to figure out AP management. But after that, the element of the weapon that you're using isn't going to play a big role. You really need to focus on getting a good rotation of skills down. As always, if there is something I didn't mention about Lune for people out there that have played the game, you can leave that there in the comments for people to give them more help with Lune. Or if you have questions about Lune and how to use them, you can also leave them in the comments, and I will try and answer them as soon as I can.